not performing for anyone. He doesn't flatter, doesn't compete, doesn't entertain, and that makes him hard to place. People might say he's distant, or too quiet, or that he's changed. What they really mean is, he no longer fits into the roles they've grown used to. They liked him better when he reflected their values. Now, he reflects something else, something still grounded and not dependent on being liked. People see him, but they don't really know him, because knowing him now would require them to see what he sees, and most people aren't ready for that. He once believed that staying connected meant staying involved, showing up, participating in conversations, maintaining appearances. But with time, that definition changed. As his priorities shifted inward, he stopped engaging out of obligation, not because he cared less, but because he no longer needed others to affirm his place in the world. He still values connection, but not if it depends on constant engagement, emotional performance, or subtle negotiation for approval. He doesn't withdraw out of resentment. He simply no longer finds value in maintaining relationships built on pretense or expectation. To those accustomed to transactional connection, his presence can feel distant. But in truth, he's simply not playing the same role anymore. He no longer speaks just to keep the peace. He no longer sees himself through other people's eyes. What emerges in that space is not loneliness, but clarity. A calm independence that allows him to remain rooted, even when others come and go. He's become honest, and from that honesty, a deeper kind of freedom begins to take shape. From the outside, solitude is often misunderstood. To most people, being alone signals a lack of friends, of purpose, of belonging. But for a man who has begun to see clearly, solitude becomes something else entirely. He no longer fills his time with distraction, just to avoid being alone with himself. He no longer seeks out constant company to escape discomfort. He's learned to sit in silence without needing it to end. What others describe as loneliness is often just unfamiliar stillness. They equate the absence of noise with emptiness.
Hey everybody, we're on the boat. We're on the Lady Hawk. We're at the beach.
He's realized that most of what fills a typical day, talks, tasks, and duties, is just noise pretending to be important. In solitude, he sees himself without distortion. There's no one to impress, no image to maintain, and that clarity, while uncomfortable at first, becomes a source of strength. He doesn't avoid people, but he also no longer depends on them to feel complete. This shift usually confuses others. They assume he must be withdrawn, disconnected, or even arrogant. But in truth, he's simply content with his own presence. He has faced the silence. Absence of familiar signals, approval, flattery, emotional reinforcement, makes others uneasy. Many of his previous friendships begin to fade, not because of conflict, but because the foundation they stood on no longer holds. He begins to notice how often relationships are maintained through shared complaints, routine habits, or the mutual reinforcement of personal narratives. Once he no longer participates in those patterns, the connection weakens on its own. He no longer feels compelled to...
Okay, I feel like this is an even better way to raise money is to just play Alan Watts for the campaign. So if you're enjoying this Alan Watts Clubhouse experience, consider giving $1 to $10 to $100 to $1,000 if you can afford it. But this is candidate Congressman John Kitover. Chris, thanks for sending me the Brad Slander video. We've reposted it to our X account. Follow us on X at John Kitover IL right now. Thank you.
Offer agreement for the sake of belonging. He no longer entertains conversations that avoid substance, and he has no interest in maintaining ties that require him to shrink himself. This shift is not a rejection of others. It's the result of a change in what he's willing to invest his energy in. True friendship becomes something quieter, simpler, and far more rare. It is no longer based on shared illusions, but on mutual recognition. Two people who don't need each other, yet choose to walk alongside one another without expectation. These kinds of connections cannot be manufactured. They emerge naturally, if at all, and only when both individuals have stopped seeking to be completed by the other. Most social interaction relies on unspoken rules. You validate my perspective, I'll validate yours. We won't go too deep. We won't challenge each other's assumption. We'll pretend we agree, even if we don't. He used to play by those rules because everyone did. But once he starts operating outside of them, the dynamic begins to break down. He no longer gives comfort just to ease tension. He doesn't pretend to agree when he doesn't. He's done with the little acts that keep everyone else feeling safe, but keep him feeling false. This isn't defiance, it's clarity. And that clarity is disruptive because it exposes how much of everyday life is based on mutual avoidance of truth. People notice, even if they don't understand what's changed. They feel the shift. They sense that something familiar has gone missing. The constant exchange of comfort, validation, and distraction. And without him feeding the system weakens. Talks start to feel awkward. People stop reaching out as much. What used to feel warm and familiar now feels tense and uneasy. Not because he did something wrong, but because he stopped playing along. He hasn't rejected anyone. He simply stopped reinforcing a structure he no longer believes in. As his understanding deepens, something unexpected happens. He begins to need less, not just materially, but emotionally, socially, even intellectually. He no longer seeks recognition. He no longer relies on others to confirm what he already knows internally. And as that need dissolves, so do many of the relationships that once required it. This is the paradox. The clearer he becomes, the quieter his life becomes. Not because he's closed off, but because so much of what once filled his time was rooted in a search for external affirmation. Without that search, most social activity feels optional, if not unnecessary. He stops trying to be understood. He stops needing to explain. He no longer measures his presence by how much space he takes up in other people's lives. From the outside, this might look like withdrawal, but inside it's the opposite, a settling into something solid and real. He still values connection, but only when it emerges naturally, without demand or performance. He hasn't become cold. He is simply no longer dependent. And in that detachment, there's a kind of depth that can't be found through attachment. Once he wakes up, he can't unsee what he sees. He looks inward, and the noise quiets. He looks outward, and the world is still asleep. He sees the false certainty in people's eyes, the roles they perform, the beliefs they never question, the constant movement that masks an inner stillness they haven't touched. He no longer envies what others call connection, because he understands the cost it often demands: agreement, performance, conformity, and he won't trade truth for the comfort of fitting in. Still, there's a part of him that remembers, a part that quietly hopes, not for crowds, not for company, but for someone awake, someone who has seen what he's seen, felt what he's felt, someone who doesn't need him to be smaller, quieter, or more agreeable in order to feel safe. That kind of meeting is rare. It can't be forced, and he would rather wait in silence than pretend in conversation. So he walks alone, not because he enjoys being apart, but because in a world still dreaming, authenticity is more valuable than acceptance. At some point, the solitude stops feeling unusual. It becomes normal, not empty, just quiet. He no longer interprets distance as a problem to solve. He sees it for what it is, the natural result of no longer pretending. While others surround themselves with noise, he has learned to live in stillness. While many chase attention, he moves without asking to be seen. People often assume he must feel lonely, as if company, any company, is always better than walking alone. But they confuse isolation with absence. He is not absent. He is simple. Offer beauty, strength, usefulness, devotion, and the reward will be love. But this is not love. It is a transaction masquerading as tenderness. It is the polite exchange of commodities between two people who have been taught to call their bargain romance. You see, a bargain can hold people together, but it cannot nourish them. Like two merchants bound by contract, they remain so long as the terms are met. Fades. The eyes that once sparkled at your arrival now glance past you as if you had become little more than a shadow in the room. We were never told as children that such love is a performance and that performances end. When you mistake the bargain for love itself, you spend your years in quiet exhaustion. You give your time, your loyalty, your devotion, believing this will secure the thing your soul longs for. But what you have secured is not love, only the continuance of an arrangement. And so it happens that many, after years of faithful giving, find themselves bewildered when the warmth fades. Not because they cease to care, but because life has moved, as all things do. Nothing stands still. Even stone wears away. Even plastic warps with time. The man or woman you first knew has changed, just as you have, and the bond built upon fixed terms begins to strain under the weight of impermanence. And there is another truth, more difficult to swallow. When the demands of the bargain are no longer met, the mask will fall. In the absence of what they sought from you, be it comfort, affirmation, or security, some will show you who they truly are. The tenderness you thought was theirs by nature may vanish, revealing not cruelty perhaps, but a hollowness where love was never rooted. You may have felt it, the gaze that no longer lingers, the laughter replaced by a cold and watchful silence. The shift is so quiet, you can almost convince yourself it isn't there. But in that stillness you see it. You were cherished not for your being, but for the service you rendered. And when such a union falters, it does not simply end. It unravels something inside you. It leaves you staring at the ruins, asking whether you were ever truly loved or only ever necessary. Love is not a bargain, nor is it a chain. It is not I will if you will, nor the silent counting of who has given more. Such things belong to the marketplace, not to the heart. True love is a freedom, the liberty to give without ledger or demand. It is to be fully present with another, not to bind them, but to care for them, simply because the caring itself is joy. It is a gift given without the shadow of a contract, without the fear that it must be returned in equal measure.
I'm gonna tell you a secret. I spent over $1 million on this event, and I've got 3 pieces of good news. Number 1, you're invited. Number 2, it's free. And number 3,
the shadow of a contract, without the fear that it must be returned in equal measure. But here lies the paradox. Such love cannot be given by one who is starving for it. The heart that is desperate to be loved back will always, in some hidden way, attach strings to its giving. It will watch, it will measure, it will wait for the return. And when it does not come, bitterness will grow like ivy through the soul. You cannot love freely until you have ceased to beg for love. And you cannot cease to beg until you have, and only then can you give love, as the sun gives light, not to be thanked, not to be owed, but because it cannot help itself. To love is your freedom. No one can take it from you. It is the act of your own being, the overflow of the life that moves through you. You may give it to one, to many, or to the whole world, but it remains yours to give, to be loved. Now that is another matter that is never in your keeping. You cannot command it, purchase it, or reason it into being. Love offered to you is a gift of its own accord, arriving when it will, leaving when it must. It is as the wind that brushes your cheek. You may open your arms to it, but you cannot hold it there forever. If love is given to you, receive it with gratitude. Drink of it while it flows, but never clutch at it, as though it were the last drop in the world. For the moment you try to drag it from another's hands, it ceases to be love and becomes something else, obligation, pity, or bondage. And remember this, you are already loved, not by the fickle tides of human affection, but by the source from which you came. It breathed you into life without condition, without demand. To see this is to know you are never wholly bereft. If you wish for itself, no longer begs, it invites. And when two such hearts meet, their love is not a trade, but a meeting of rivers, each full from its own spring. When two people who have learned to dwell at peace within themselves come together, it is not to be filled, for their cups are already full. They do not arrive at each other's door as beggars, bowls outstretched. They come as givers, carrying abundance that spills over the rim. In such a union, there is no bargaining. No one is keeping score. No quiet dread of who owes who. Love is not given to earn, nor withheld to punish. It moves as naturally as breath, as the tide that rises and falls without being told. Here, the joy is not in taking, but in sharing. There is no hunger in the eyes, only light. One gives not because the other demands it, but because giving is the most natural expression of their being. And so both are fed, not by the draining of one into the other, but by the overflow of each. This is the only love that does not rot into resentment. For where there is no emptiness to be filled, there is no fear of losing. When two full hearts meet, they are free to let each other be, to grow, to change, to wander and return, without the grasping that turns love into a cage. And yet, such a meeting is rare, for most search the world to find another who will complete them, not knowing they were never half a person to begin with. Only when you drink deeply from your own well will you find another who drinks from theirs. And together You will not merely survive, you will overflow. The world you meet each day is not a stranger. It is yourself in another form. You cannot draw from a well what is not in it, nor can you meet in others what you have not yet met. In your own heart, if you carry a hollowness within, you will find yourself surrounded by those who take, not because the world conspires against you, but because nature fills a vacuum. Those who have nothing will seek from you what you have not given to yourself, and you will mistake their hunger for love. If, on the other hand, you move through life with a fullness of being, you will meet those who also carry an abundance. They will not clutch at you or drain you, for they are not living on scraps. Instead, you will find an ease in their company, a recognition as though you had always known them. This is not a mystical trick, nor some hidden cosmic law, but a simple truth of human meeting. The depth to which you have faced yourself becomes the depth to which you can meet another. Most quarrels in love are not between two people, but between the unexamined shadows each has brought along. So, before you go searching for kindness, tenderness, or devotion in the eyes of another, turn inward and meet your own gaze, not to condemn yourself, nor to tally your flaws, but to make the acquaintance of the stranger you have long carried in silence. For it is this hidden self who extends the invitation to others, this unseen presence, who will decide whether the love you meet will be a feast to your soul or the slow unraveling of it. When this truth takes root in you, do not hoard it. Place it gently in the hands of your children, for they are stepping into the same illusion that once ensnared you. Teach them that love is not the trembling romance of songs, nor the solemn bargain sealed before altar and law. It is the willingness to give without the shadow of a demand, to care without the constant fear of loss. If they do not learn this, they will build their homes upon sand and watch them crumble. But if they do, they will stand on rock, and love will not be a cage, but a sky. The question is not, how can I find someone to love me? But the question is, how can I become someone who overflows? For when love is no longer a plea but a gift, when joy is no longer chained to another's approval, you will see that to love and be loved is not something to chase. It is the way you already are. You are not a half searching for the other half. You are whole. And from that wholeness, love flows, finding those who recognize it instantly. Then love ceases to be a hunt or a bargain or a desperate keeping. It becomes the quiet, steady light of the sun, needing nothing in return, yet warming the whole sky.
Cascade Platinum Plus has the grease-fighting power of Dawn to remove tough, stuck-on foods. Cascade Platinum Plus.
Get a shave that serves your skin. New Venus Moisture Glide. Bars with argan oil and lock moisture in.
There is a curious paradox, which is, to love is unconditional, but to be loved is conditional.